10 million good miles has proven autonomous vehicles are safe. Truth or myth? This one's a myth. In 2023, 2 companies published results from their first million autonomous driverless miles. Waymo published a 1 million mile rider report in February 2023, and Cruise published one in September 2023. And both of them claimed that they were safer than human drivers. In both cases, the emphasis was on at-fault crashes. They're looking at crashes saying, well, if the other human driver caused the crash, we're not going to count that one. We're only going to look at crashes that we caused, which is only part of the story for road safety. Another part of the story is avoiding crashes. Maybe the other person did something wrong, but did you avoid it? And the 2 companies do talk about that. Waymo certainly talks about that more. In September 2023, Waymo came out with a report done in cooperation with Swiss Re Insurance Company based on 3.8 million miles. And what they claimed was safer than human-driven vehicles, and they said there are 100% fewer bodily injury claims, meaning no bodily injury claims. So the claims being made here are that based on 1 to 3 or 4 million miles, they're seeing fewer low-severity crashes. We're seeing no bodily injuries. We're seeing fewer fender benders, and therefore we're safe. Now, an interesting note is that this Waymo report in September 2023 ended its data study period the day before there was a passenger injury in a Waymo robotaxi, and it's unclear how that would have affected the outcome of the study if they had included one more day of data. How many road testing miles? Well, Waymo, as of the time this is recorded, claim that they have tens of millions of miles, 40 million miles, and that includes both robotaxi operational deployment with no test driver, but also test driver miles is my understanding. Okay, tens of millions of miles. That sounds impressive. It's 80 times to the moon and back. That sounds like a lot, and it's meant to impress us with how many miles. But the question is, how many miles is that compared to what you really need to know for fatalities? Because the companies are saying they're going to reduce fatalities. Fatalities is the metric they keep pushing. It's about saving lives. So we should judge them on how far are they to prove they're saving lives. Well, let's look at the data. Human drivers run 79 million miles to 98 million miles between fatal crashes. And it depends which year you look at. So that's just under 100 million miles between fatal crashes. That includes all the drunk, impaired, speeding. If you look at unimpaired, non-speeding drivers, the number's actually a lot higher, more than 100 million miles between fatal crashes. If you want to be statistically as good as an average human driver, including the misbehaving drivers with 95% confidence, you need between 237 million and 294 million vehicle miles with no fatalities to prove you're at least as good. So 237 to 294 million, and they have 40 million. That's where we are now. So they're nowhere near having enough miles to prove statistically that they're actually on a par with or reducing fatalities. But the problem with this plan is that at 250 million miles, give or take, if you only have 100 million miles between crashes, you've probably had 1 or 2 crashes. So you need even more miles for the statistics to average out. Rule of thumb, about 10 times as many miles. And so you're talking something like 1 billion miles, and they have 40 million. Now, Waymo, to its credit, in their 7.1 million mile report says no statement can be made regarding serious injuries and fatalities. And they're absolutely right, because they don't have the 1 billion miles. So to the degree they say, we think we're safer on low severity events, and we think we're on track for fatalities and on track for severe injuries, but really we don't know how it's going to turn out, that would be a complete statement. But what do they really say? What they're saying often lacks nuance. And the nuance really matters here. Robotaxi companies have been predicting acceptable safety for a while, based on non-severe crash rates that then extrapolate to see how it would turn out for severe crashes and fatalities, sometimes with controversial limitations to the study. Right now, what Waymo has on its page is that their safety philosophy is that they're already reducing traffic injuries and fatalities. Okay, so maybe they're reducing low severity injuries, but the serious injury rates and the fatality rates are predicted because they simply don't have enough miles to know how it's going to turn out. Now, they can really believe in their predictions, they believe in their methodology, and that's great. I certainly hope it turns out to be true, But we don't have the miles. Nobody has the miles to know whether their predictions are true or something's going to arise that they did not predict that's going to cause a problem. We need 300 million miles or more, possibly up to a billion miles, to confirm whether driverless robotaxis will be as safe as even average human drivers. And we have maybe 5 to 10 million miles driverless now per company, with continually evolving software. And there's a question as to whether or not you reset the odometer every time there's a software change. The reduced fatality rates are still aspirational. The companies are confident they're on a path. That's great. I certainly hope they get there. But it's a little early to claim victory because we have a few 100 million more miles to go before we see how it really turns out and to see what safety issues that could lead to fatalities they did not consider in their analysis. The unknown unknowns are the issue here. Declaring safety victory at this point is sort of like running a marathon. You've run a mile, you're beating your splits, you're on track for the world record marathon, but you're only 1 mile in. There's a bunch more miles to go and lots of things can go wrong in those miles. That's where we are with robotaxi safety now. The takeaway is that companies predict but cannot yet prove severe injury fatality safety. We're going to have to wait quite a lot longer to know how that really turns out.